Greetings and welcome to another edition of the Ad Astra Kansas Money Talks podcast. I'm Joe Blubaugh and I'm joined by Mark Johnson. And if you've watched us before, you'll notice that we're missing somebody today. So Bob Schwartz of Bob Schwartz Financial, not here today. He took the day off. We decided we're going to try to do a podcast without him. We'll see how it goes.
We'll see.
We'll see how it goes. So Bob Schwartz Financial, they have offices in Victoria, Kansas, as well as Silver Lake, Kansas, where we're at today. And you can find out more about the services that they provide at bobschwartzfinancial.com. And if you're watching us on YouTube, we would appreciate it if you'd subscribe, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to us on wherever you get your podcast at, and we appreciate you joining us. We always talk about a lot of money issues, specifically to Kansas sometimes. This time we're going to talk about an issue that challenges everybody at times. We're going to talk about finances after graduation, specifically from college. What do you do as you enter the working world? Maybe you're entering into it with some debt. We're going to talk a little bit about that. We've talked about 529s and other college savings plans in other episodes. We're not really going to focus on that today. Mm-hmm. We're going to focus more on what do you do once you've graduated from college, you're entering the working world, and maybe you found that first job, and in your mind you thought, cha-ching, I've hit the jackpot. And then life kicks in. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. A little personal story before we get started. I'm in my 50s. I won't say how old I am. I'm in my 50s. We'll leave it at that. And I remember my first job out of college, $32,000. It was the starting salary. And I remember at the time, holy cow, I have arrived. Yeah. And then rent, insurance. I just got married. Wasn't too long after that we started having kids, and all of a sudden $32,000 was not nearly as much as I thought it was. Yep. And so my point is that everybody goes through these challenges when they first get into the working world and start to have life kick in. Adulting, as I like to say nowadays. Yeah, everybody has to adjust to adulting. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Mark, your background is education. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I think, just as a nation, we don't do a great job is education when it comes to finances and personal finance, whether that be in high school or college. And that's something that's an issue, don't you believe? Yeah.
So this episode really is not just for the people that are graduating, but if you have somebody, a kid or a grandchild that, that's just graduating from college or is just starting in the workforce, that hopefully you have some information now that you can have a conversation with them about some of these issues. But for example, in Kansas, there was no personal finance standard for the state of Kansas for schools until this last year. And so just now you have to have a semester of financial literacy, and that just started for the freshmen this year, 2025. And so before then, I feel like most schools were incredibly underserved with basic financial literacy, financial education, and really, colleges have no, that's not a part of a gen ed, I don't believe, for many colleges that I know of, that you have to get some sort of financial education.
Now, with the state of Kansas and this new requirement for one semester of financial literacy, I think it's my understanding that's a pretty vague term, correct? The school district gets to decide kind of what that looks like. So
yeah, there's some national standards for the financial literacy that they're supposed to go off of, but there's no specific, hey, here are the 5 things that the state of Kansas wants you to do by the end. It's they pretty much give out the national standards for financial literacy and say do what you want, which is fine.
It's a good start.
Yeah, it is a good start. So
yeah. So we're starting to see in Kansas at least some of that taught in our high schools. But as you said, in colleges, it's usually not part of the curriculum for really any degree that I'm aware of. Now, if you go into finance, obviously you're going to get some more than just entry level. That's what your degree is in. So you would hope that there's some accountability in there as well when it comes to that. But for the average student, this is a lot of times they're walking into that blind, and college it's not cheap.
No.
And there's a lot of student loans that get taken out as part of this. So really, we see a workforce where the average student moving into the workforce is going into it with a load of debt as well. And that's really one of the things we want to talk about today, is paying down that debt and making sure that's a priority when you do get that first job.
Yeah. So paying down debt, first of all, if you can find a way to work through college, get scholarships, do whatever you can to have the least amount of student loans as possible. I mean, I cannot, we try to make that as big a priority as possible for people to understand how to use 529s or, other sort of savings plans for college so that we can avoid taking out student loans. Student loans can be very predatory. They can be very, they can take advantage of students, especially ones that don't really know what they're looking at. And so we really want to make sure at all possible, we don't want to take as many loans as we can. And if we are, we want to have a plan going in.
Right, that sounds great. And once again, we'll touch on those 529s because they're such a great vehicle, but you need to start those before your student gets to college. Those are a grade school, middle school, even high school. It's good to, even if you've got high school age kids, start those 529s, but the earlier the better to let that compound interest kick in. But if you're already at that college level or you've just graduated, that might not have been an option. So student loans,
Yep.
I know I took out student loans, and we're going to talk a little bit about some ways that you can minimize debts with student loans. But I do agree that if you do have loans, paying the minimum or just ignoring them is not the way to go.
Yeah, that can get you in a world of hurt really quick. So first of all, you should know when you're getting a student loan, you should know your interest rate. You should know what you're being charged to take out this money, and then you should also know what is the minimum payment every month. You should, if you don't know those two things, you're being
Naive,
you're being naive, or you're being taken advantage of by someone that's not educating you well enough on the loan. So, and that does happen. Really sadly, that does happen to people. So make sure you know those two things. And then the other thing I would consider, and we'll talk about refinancing here in a second, but the other thing I would really consider is if you're working a job that has some sort of loan forgiveness program that you can enter in, teaching, nursing, anything medical, certain municipalities, they offer loan forgiveness. If you're going to take on hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical debt, it might be worth working at a hospital in a rural area for 5 years and getting your medical school paid for.
Yeah.
Those things might suck just at the beginning, but you're going to be pretty happy in 5 years and you have no debt and you're making good money while you're doing it. So those are things that you should really look at when you are taking this loan. Are there ways for it to be forgiven in the end too?
And it is something people need to consider when they're looking at their first career job. I mean, there's always people focus on the salary, but you got to look at those benefits too. And if you have maybe a little bit lesser salary in one job, but it offers that student loan forgiveness where they're going to pay back your student loans,
Yep.
that might be something to consider. Of course, the route I went is also a route that people can go, and that's the military. So you can do time in the military. Definitely that program kind of goes in and out at times based on recruiting needs, but I know I had student loan forgiveness for a chunk of my student loans by going into the military. So there are some options out there for sure.
Yeah, there are options to get your loans paid for. And you should make sure that you research and know those options before, you start start doing those minimum payments and freaking out and thinking you're never going to get out of this cycle, because that does happen to a lot of people.
It is, and if you're making the minimum payments, a student loan can be around for years. And one of the things that I've always been so passionate about is developing a budget. And you've got to make sure that you develop your budget around those payments. And then I would say you need to get to a point where you're not just making those minimum payments. One of the things we do want to talk about is refinancing, because the rate that you might have locked into for your student loan might be considerably higher than a rate you could get if you refinance the loan.
Yep.
Combine those loans, maybe if you have multiple student loans, be able to combine those into one payment and get your interest rate down. I think that the thing that I would be very careful about is if you do have multiple loans and you're making multiple minimum payments there, and all of a sudden you've combined it into a one big loan, just make sure you're still making as much of the payment as you were. Don't start paying even less on those loans.
Yeah, and then there's kind of two major ways you can look at how you're going to take on the loans. You can either do a snowball or an avalanche. Both can be really good, good ways to do it. It just kind of depends on your own psychology, like how you kind of want to attack debt. Snowball, you maybe start with minimum payments as you start your new job, and you start to be like, okay, well, I do have $50 extra every month in my budget. Why don't I put that on? And as you go, you add more and more as you make a little bit more money. You understand your budget a little bit better. And as you go, that snowball gets rolling more and more. You're putting more money onto your principal. And as you go, it moves faster and faster and faster.
And I think the thought behind the snowball approach is that you're going to attack the smallest debt. So if you have multiple student loan debts, what's the one that has the smallest balance? Maybe not the smallest interest rate, but the smallest balance. And you throw everything extra at that with the idea that it gets paid off. And then it does two things. One, there's a psychology of, I got that one paid off. I can do this. And you get that psychology, and but then also you take that minimum payment from that small debt, and now you can apply that to the next smallest debt, and it literally snowballs like that. It's very similar in weight loss. Sometimes if you can just see those first few pounds come off, then you have the motivation to really get it rolling. On the avalanche side, it's a little different, correct?
Avalanche is the opposite. Pay your high interest debt first. Crush that big monster in the closet, that's scaring you so much, and then everything else from there becomes a lot easier. Get rid of the big bad thing first, and then go from there.
Okay. And once again, you mentioned it. It depends on who you are and your psychology, and which one makes the most sense to you. So.
One of the best things too is just being consistent. We talked about this with automation when we talked about how to pay yourself first, but have an automatic system to pay your loans. Your loans should come out right when you get paid. That loan payment should come right out of your checking account. You should never have to think about it. And maybe you do add extra money each month. You have that, but that should be a no thought process. You should make that not where you can click, I'll just do the minimum, or I won't do it this month. Take that click out of the equation.
Because you're paying yourself first. The sooner you get that debt paid off, the more money you're going to have available to go on those vacations, save for a house, invest. Those are your ultimate goals, but you got to get that debt knocked out first, especially student loan debt. And that also gets you to that consistency as well. So as we kind of fast forward now, students are now in the working force, a college graduate, they've got their debt paid off. Maybe it's a couple years down the road. Hopefully it hasn't take that long. And maybe even as part of this process, even before they get the debt completely paid off, saving for an emergency fund is a big step in there as well.
And we've talked about emergency funds quite a bit, but this is a major priority if you're trying to help someone, especially help them understand that, once you graduate, there are going to be things, your car is going to break down, an appliance is going to, not work. Having a 3 to 6 month expense is great to have in something, but if it, psychologically, we've heard a ton about having $1,000 saved up in emergency fund, how that is a huge starting point for people, and how that can really help. And really 60% of Americans don't have that access to that, which is a crazy number.
That is a crazy number.
But that is a wonderful way to start for someone to say, hey, can you get $1,000 into a high yield savings account and do a money market somewhere where it's gaining some interest, but it's going to sit there for you, and when you need it, you can call upon it.
And it's always available.
Always available to you.
And the goal behind an emergency fund would be, you mentioned a car breaking down. Let's say you have a $600 repair. You're not swiping a credit card, and all of a sudden your debt isn't going the right way, it's going the wrong way, and it's high interest, really high interest on top of that. the goal with the emergency fund is, okay, I have that $600 emergency. I'm going to grab 600 out of my emergency fund, and then I focus on building that back up to that $1,000.
Exactly.
And the $1,000 we use as an example. Maybe you feel more comfortable $2,000 or $2,500, whatever it is that gives you that comfort level. But the goal here is that you're not getting worse into debt when emergencies arise. And trust me, you're always going to have something that comes up.
And it really is better as you become more financially stable. That 3 to 6 month living expense is really probably the standard. I'd say even up to a year once you get settled into your job. If you get laid off or something happens to you, medical, having a whole year's worth of money in emergency fund is, or in a money market somewhere, a fixed account that's making you some money, I think is a really powerful thing.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's worth mentioning that emergency funds are for that. They're for emergencies. Yeah. And going on a vacation or going to a concert is not an emergency. That money really needs to be set aside and left alone for those true emergencies.
Yeah, and in the day of we're in the day of where everyone will finance anything. If people are financing their trips to Disney and this is not coming out of, these are your savings. These are for real problems that occur in your life that you're not budgeting for. They are not in your budget. And if you are going on a trip, you're doing one of these things, those should be a part of your budget that you and your household have come up with.
Yeah. Yeah. And let's talk about the physical location of those funds, because if you have an issue with spending that money because you can see it or it's right there in your checking account, it actually makes sense to maybe put that in a different account.
Yeah, somewhere where it's like even putting it in a money market or somewhere with a brokerage house where you have to actually get in there and sell the money market then to get access to the cash. Even putting that one little step in there can deter you from maybe just pulling money out, on a whim.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on because we're kind of stepping through a career here, and so now our college graduate has gotten out of their debt. They've saved that 3 to 6 months, maybe a year, whatever they feel most comfortable with for an emergency fund. It's time to start thinking about, I know it's hard for a 22-year-old who just graduated from college, but you can never start too early on saving for retirement.
Yeah, and this is how many times have you heard someone be like, I should have started sooner. Everybody,
right here.
Yeah, everybody has wished they'd started sooner with retirement, or at least went in understanding a little bit more about their retirement. And how to save for that, because we all hopefully all understand, compound interest is a magical thing. It works wonders. $100 in your 20s can be up to worth about $500 in your 40s. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah, the power of compound interest is really amazing.
Yeah,
and it makes sense if you are starting earlier. Obviously this varies, but I think I've heard your money in the market can double, depending on the returns, but about every 10 years is a good way to average that. So if you have an extra 5 or 10 years, your money will double again. And you might think, well, my money, I'm only saving it, I've only got $20,000 in my retirement account, so that's really not that much. Well, think of it on the other end of the equation. If you got your money in earlier, and by the time you get to your 50s and you want it to, and maybe you're not going to draw it till you're in your 60s, and it doubles that one last time, then that can be pretty magnificent.
Yeah. And one of the other things that a lot of people don't think about is funding their Roth IRA. Especially when you just graduate from college, you're probably eligible to fund a Roth, first of all, because you're probably not making enough to not be eligible. And that $7,000, if you're able to max that out, that $7,000 every month. Every year. If you're able to max that out, that is tax-free growth. And that is incredibly powerful. and you might not get to do that forever. Maybe one day you and your household are going to be earning enough that you can't contribute to a Roth without maybe doing a backdoor or something like that. But so early on, you want to be taking advantage of every year that you can max that Roth IRA, that you take advantage of it.
And let's take just a second to back up on this, because we talk about it quite a bit, but it's worth, just in case somebody isn't aware of what a Roth IRA is versus a traditional IRA. A traditional IRA is you get your paycheck, but you're going to put money into your IRA, but you get to deduct that money from your tax statement or your tax filing at the end of the year. Or if it's we're going to talk about 401ks here, but if it's in your 401k, they actually take that tradition or that contribution out before you pay taxes on it. With a Roth, it's exactly the opposite. You pay your taxes, then you buy your Roth, and you don't get to deduct that from your taxes. Or if it's in your 401k and they have a Roth version, which most employers do now, then it's taken out after the taxes are. But the deal is that you never then pay taxes on that money or any earnings. That's the big one. Any earnings that money might get you over your lifetime before you start using it in retirement. When you're young, especially, it is exceedingly powerful, the Roth IRA.
Yeah, and Roth IRAs just have more flexibility in general. I mean, they're really powerful for young people. Everything that Joe said is true. Also, all the money you've already paid taxes and put it in there, like if something really does happen that you have to have some money, you can pull that out.
Right.
Because all the money, nothing that you've gained, but money that you've actually put in there is eligible for you to take out.
And I think it's important that we note that you can take your contributions out. That's what you're saying. Any earnings you take out would be penalized. It'd be they're taxed if you're not old enough, or if it hasn't been in long enough. But it's also a penalty. The government penalizes you. But for the actual contributions, you can pull that out tax-free and penalty-free. Now, we also should put a huge caveat.
Yeah, we don't want to do that.
Don't do that.
Yeah, don't
Unless
do that.
you absolutely have an emergency where you have to.
But there's not many retirement accounts that allow you to do that.
Correct.
Yeah, and so that is, like I said, it is a powerful thing. It is a more flexible thing. It's just a really good option for people that are starting out. If you're a high schooler and you're working a job, if you're earning income, you should really think about starting a Roth IRA. And that's, one of our focuses on parents, grandparents, whoever you are for college grads. But if you have a kid that is working a job that has some money that's sitting in their savings account doing nothing, you should probably start, get on a brokerage and open up a Roth IRA for them to start getting money so it can grow.
Yeah, I agree. The flexibility there, just as you mentioned, is pretty amazing. There's also, we kind of mentioned it, 401k version. The great thing about a 401k is not only are there no income limits, so like with an IRA, that's a non-employer vehicle to save retirement money. There are income limitations both for Roth and traditional. You have some income limitations. With the 401k, there are not. You just get to take those out. The other thing is, as you mentioned, there's a $7,000 annual limit on an IRA contribution. The limit on a 401k is considerably higher than that.
Yeah.
I believe it's 22.5.
Yeah,
and
I think it went up actually a little bit to 24 maybe. But I think
it's considerably more. So you have more opportunity. And by the way, you can do both. So they're independent of each other. So definitely a good opportunity to try to save money there too, and never forget about the match. That's the most important of all.
Yeah, if you have a grad or someone in your life that is just getting into a company that has a 401k, which most larger companies, even mid-sized companies have now, because that is the preferred retirement plan for most people now, they probably are offering a match, and it might be awesome. It might be at 3%, but regardless, you should try to encourage them. If you can get up to the match, do it.
That always needs to be a minimum goal, because it's money you're leaving on the table if you're not taking advantage of it.
And we understand some people's financial situations obviously don't allow for that, but that should be your goal to make that match, because man, that is, you don't get free money very, very often in this world. And that match is an amazing thing over time when you think about, hey, you're not doing 3%, you're getting 6%.
Right.
And that's pretty awesome.
Well, and what's great about that, first of all, 100% return on your money.
Yep.
You never get that in the stock market.
Yep.
100% return on your money. And the great thing is it's just more money in early that compounds over your lifetime. So,
Yep.
all right, let's move on, because there are some pitfalls that come along with as you first get into the workforce. A lot of people think that they need to do all this overnight.
Yep.
I have all this newfound income. I need it to happen. I need it to happen right now. This is a marathon, not a sprint.
Yep. What's tough is you're going to see people, if you or like your kid or whatever, there's going to be people that they roomed with or they're best friends with, that they're still hanging out with, that are going to maybe make significant more money than them right out of the gate. And that's really hard. For example, I was a teacher. My 3 best friends were all engineers. Guess who was making the least amount of money out of this group? Those guys made a lot more money than me. And it's hard when you're like, wow, they bought a sweet house. They bought a huge house in Johnson County. That's really cool. Good for them. What you can't do is look at that lifestyle and be like, oh, I got to do that too. Like the lifestyle creep, lifestyle inflation, where you try to do what those other people are doing. On the other end, if you're one of those, you're a parent or someone that has a kid that is the highest earner, you should talk to them about how, that can be hard, really, really hard for a kid from making nothing to making $150,000, let's say, out of the gate. They might not know how to handle that amount of money, and they might just spend it because they don't know any different. So those are real conversations about retirement, how to save, how to set yourself up for success. Because if you're a 22-year-old making $150,000 out of the gate, you do have a pretty awesome advantage, going forward, to be honest.
Well, and it's interesting because we talked very early in this episode about a lack of financial literacy that is taught as part of a curriculum. But I would also argue that in today's world, the amount of information that is at your fingertips is at an all-time high.
Yep.
So, if you're listening to this podcast, there's a good chance you listen to other financial podcasts as well. Whether you're the one that's just recently graduated or just got your first real, quote unquote, real job where you're earning some, significantly more money than you ever have, or you are a parent or a grandparent of somebody that is in that situation, there are tons of financial podcasts, great places to learn. There's also a couple good books out there that you recommend.
Yeah, the books that I really think that are great, if you're going to gift a financial book to a grad or someone that thinks you think might need it, would be The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. That can really help with just the psychological side of money. It also does talk about some basics of money, all that good stuff. But just understanding the psychological, why am I spending the way I am? Why are the other people, understanding the why on a lot of things, what you do when it comes to money, is really, really powerful. It's probably one of the best books I've actually ever read. I just put that as one of the best. And then one of my favorite for just the action steps, how to actually save money, how to actually do the things, is a book called I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi. I can't ever say his last name.
Easy for you to say.
Yeah. But he actually has a show on Netflix, but his book is really, really good. It really shows you, he actually goes in and talks about how to do certain things, how to set up accounts, how to automate your payments, how to negotiate with credit card. He just does a lot of things where it's the action steps of how to deal with your finances. I don't agree with everything with it in terms of investment strategy and things like that, but he does an amazing job personal finance wise. So really recommend those 2 books.
And I think that one thing that I think be willing to ask questions. If you don't understand something, be willing to talk to somebody within your circle that is good with finances, or you see success, emulate that. Talk to them. And same thing, if you're the parent or the grandparent and you have somebody in your circle that is graduating from college or maybe is struggling as they've entered the workforce, be willing to go to them and talk to them. And then, of course, the other thing is work with a financial advisor. That's what you guys are here for as well. If you've got, if you're making a considerable amount more money than you ever have in your life, but you're still not saving anything, there's something you probably need to be doing, and it's worth sitting down with a professional. And hopefully people will take advantage of the expertise from people like yourselves, and Bob and Mark are willing to work with you, and you can always find out more information on bobschwartzfinancial.com.
Yeah, and one of my favorite groups to meet with is like kids in college or just out of college, and just make it for me, myself, it's like there's no pressure to invest money at that point. I just want to make it's just a conversation about your finances and getting you on the right step. And as we are a fiduciary firm, just helping someone get started that is almost like one of the most meaningful things in our job, is helping people get going with their finances and get started. And if that leads into a relationship that works out in the future, that's awesome. But it seriously is one of the most impactful things when you get to see someone, you're like, hey, we took your advice 3 or 4 years ago and got this started, and we're doing really well, and got them on the right foot. So don't be afraid if someone's not willing to meet with you because you don't have a bunch of money. That's dumb. Make sure talk to someone that you trust, and figure out someone that if you really do want help, there should be people that are going to meet with you that would be willing to help. And
absolutely.
Me and Bob are always that case. So
yeah. And if you didn't know, a year ago at this time, Mark had just finished up his last semester of teaching.
Yep.
So he literally has the heart of a teacher, because he is a teacher at heart, and he loves to educate people.
Yep.
So bobschwartzfinancial.com, you can get contact information there, find out more about what they do to help people. They can help you as well. We'll wrap up this episode. Yep. Hopefully next week, Bob will be back to join us. Mark, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Joe.
Conversation. Once again, if you're watching us on YouTube, we'd love for you to subscribe, give us a thumbs up, subscribe wherever you get your favorite podcast. And until next time, have a great day.
Bye.